Welcome everyone. It's lovely to see you all here. Thank you very much for coming. It's brilliant. I'm really excited to be here. I'm just so grateful also for Helen and Steve for hosting us. What a beautiful building. We're very lucky indeed. So I'm Sarah Pearson, as you know. I'm a volunteer, I'm a sea champion working for the Marine Conservation Society, and I'm here to tell you about seagrass, and my colleague Kate Whitten-Brown, who is a volunteer engagement manager for South and South East England, will bring you up to speed with the Life Recreation's ReMEDIES project, which is a big effort to conserve, restore and protect damaged seagrass meadows on the southern coasts of England. The Marine Conservation is just one of 7 partners, so hands up if you've heard of seagrass before. Oh, wow, so quite a few of you haven't actually, which is fantastic. So you're going to learn a lot. So what I'd love you to do is we're sort of going along like this really, and I'm chatting away and so on, and you're just getting a little bit, okay, well this is 17th slide, Sarah. What I'd love you to do is to really think, what is the most profound learning? Okay, and hold on to that, write it down or whatever, but hold it, because I just think it's really interesting to see what we take from this, you know. But what is the biggest learning that you get from this presentation? So let's just go from here. And that's lovely, okay. Right. Okay. So we've got a lot to get through. We're going to begin by saying what is seagrass, why conservation of seagrass is so important, and what is being done to protect it and how you can help. We'll learn more about blue carbon, what is blue carbon anyway, and when we talk about seagrass as a mitigation measure, what do we mean? And what do we mean about its role in blue carbon? And we'll also discuss the very latest work in the marine protected areas containing seagrass, and we're going to outline how seagrass is becoming increasingly recognised as an essential marine habitat globally that is vital in its own right, but that also can counter climate and biodiversity crises. So to begin, what are seagrasses? Well, you can see here, look at these beautiful pictures here. Okay, seagrasses are flowering plants that grow 10 metres in 10 metres of water, and strikingly, these dense seagrass meadows are critical to the survival of every living thing on Earth. Why? Well, it's very simple. Seagrass meadows produce oxygen and they filter out pollution, and the beds slow currents and thereby protect shorelines. Seagrass meadows are home to thousands of species, so having healthy, flourishing seagrass meadows is essential for healthy communities, as the meadows provide food security, mitigate climate change, and provide livelihoods for many, so we do need to protect them. Okay, so seagrasses. Seagrasses evolved from plants that recolonized the ocean 70 to 100 million years ago, and seagrass is recorded first as appearing in fossil records 90 million years ago. So how can you recognize seagrass? You want to tell your friends, you want to know about it, you want to be able to spot that seagrass against that seaweed. Well, what does it look like? Where does it grow? It lives in shallow, sheltered areas, grows anchored in sand, mud, or fine gravel on the seafloor of temperate or tropical coastlines, and is found in large groups, these beds, these meadows, that resemble, if you like, the terrestrial grasslands that we see, or meadows, obviously terrestrial meadows, but they need clean water of 10 metres to thrive. And seagrass meadows can be found along our UK coastline, in sheltered areas in harbours, estuaries, lagoons and bays. Here in the UK, we have 4 species of this lovely flowering plant. Okay, sometimes they're all grouped together as seagrass, but there's 2 species of tassel weeds, okay, or they're called Ruppia species, okay, and there's 2 species of Zoster marina and Zoster noltai, okay. Zoster marina is commonly known as common eelgrass, and Zoster noltai is known as dwarf eelgrass. The noltai is the intertidal species, and the Zostera is the subtidal. Okay, and restoration in the ReMEDIES project focuses specifically, which of course Kate is going to tell you all about later, on this Zostera species. And the reason why, I guess in the UK, it's actually the most common species here, with wide but patchy subtidal meadows distributed around mainly around the west of Scotland and the southwest of England. And intertidally, the Zostera marina beds are most extensive along the east coast of Scotland, Moray, Cromarty Firth, southeast, and also the southwest of England in the Thames estuary and in the Exe estuary, respectively. Zostera noltai is actually along the east coast of the UK, coinciding with the distribution of intertidal Zostera marina beds. Okay, so you're getting a little bit of understanding here, but you want to know a bit more. You want to understand the clarification between seaweed and seagrass. And so let's up your knowledge on this, okay? The main differences between seaweeds and seagrass are seaweed, of course, is algae, okay, and has a holdfast, yeah? A holdfast and transports nutrients by diffusion. Okay, seagrasses are flowering vascular plants with roots and internal transport system. And it's really sensible to be able to distinguish between the two because they're so very different, okay? Seagrass is the only flowering plant growing in the marine environment, producing seeds, flowers, and fruit, okay? Whereas seaweeds, of course, produces spores. Yes, seagrasses are flowering plants with a root system and an internal transport system, and they take up nutrients such as phosphorus and nitrates, and the rhizomes here form this really dense mat, okay, and that's really important, but it holds the whole plant system together. They're this huge mat-like base. Seagrasses, if you like, use their roots to extract nutrients, and they're transported around the plant via a vascular system, whereas seaweed extracts nutrients from around it, rather than up around. So seagrasses, of course, grow vertically, and they also horizontally, and they spread in meadows. And like all autotrophic plants, seagrasses photosynthesize in the submerged photic zone, the sunlight layer, yeah, and occur in shallow coastal waters anchored in mud. Seagrasses form seagrass meadows and are one of the most productive ecosystems in the world, okay? So a plant is called a seagrass if it fulfills 4 criteria, okay? The first is it must be adapted to life in a saline medium. The second, it must be able to grow fully submerged. And the third, it must have a secure anchoring system. And finally, it must have a hydrophilous pollination mechanism. That means it uses water as a vector, as a tool to transport pollen. Okay. So the seagrass ecosystem is highly productive with immense ecological and socio-economic importance. Okay? They provide complex habitat, a wonderful complex habitat for shelter and food, and provides a nursery for juvenile and baby fish, including seahorses, living on the blades of the grass. And in addition to supporting marine life, they produce a huge amount of organic matter and are a major source of energy of food in the marine food web. So a keystone species, creating rich biodiversity full of many different types of sea creatures. And the plant plays a significant role in nutrient regeneration, shore stabilization, and the roots of the plant stabilize the seabed, helping to minimize erosion, absorbing wave action, and binding the sediment together. The seagrass blades or leaves absorb carbon and store it and holds it in the tissues within the seabed sediments, and the grasses produce oxygen, and so it's essential for marine life. Tragically, it's important to understand that seagrass has declined by 70% in UK waters since the 1930s. Less than 100 years, we've lost 70%, and in some areas up to 90%. So that is very bad. The nursery role of seagrass beds includes many economically and commercially important finfish and shellfish, and provide a nursery habitat for invertebrate species that are spawned offshore and pass through a series of larval stages before moving into the coastal waters. As larvae or post-larvae, and make the transition before settling into the seagrass habitat. Seagrasses provide an abundant food and protection from predators for the small creatures. This slide shows 3 rather wonderful images showing the nursery role of the seagrass meadows in the UK, and illustrate, if you like, how important it is. So we can see here this wonderful picture by Paul Naylor. We can see in the seagrass meadows here we've got tiny baby cuttlefish growing, okay? And here with this picture by, credit to Mark Parry, which is actually netted dog whelks. This tiny weeny baby juvenile seahorses, picture taken by Georgie Bull. But we can see there, if you like, how super relevant these pictures actually are to us, because they're all photographed in southern England, in our seagrass meadows in southern England, and importantly highlight the shelter the seagrass meadows provide and how vital it is for marine life locally. Going beyond the nursery, which of course we all get, is of course the understanding the ecosystem services that seagrass provides and how critical that is to life. So there's 4 definitions which I think are particularly useful. One is seagrass in terms of its provisioning, okay, that it provides sufficient biodiversity to encourage global fisheries and nursery habitat for marine life. The secondly, we know, is about provided by the ecosystem service that moderates the natural phenomena, storing large amounts of carbon in the biomass, in the sediment, and helping to mitigate against climate change, buffering against acidification by oxygenating the water and removing carbon dioxide. But culturally, of course, also very important in terms of the advancement of people. You know, the opportunities for recreation, such as bird watching, diving, and fishing. Fourthly, supporting, of course, probably the most fundamental natural process, such as photosynthesis, nutrient cycling, creation of soils, and the water cycle, filtering and controlling disease. So ecosystems are many, and there are various benefits to humans provided by the natural environment from healthy ecosystems. Such ecosystems, of course, include agroecosystems, forest and grassland ecosystems, and of course, aquatic ecosystems. And in spite of the importance of these services, ecologically, culturally, and economically, in ways we've just discussed, unfortunately, the ecosystems and their biodiversity are still being degraded and lost at unprecedented scale. And one major reason for that is the value, the importance of ecosystems to human welfare is underestimated and not fully recognized in everyday planning and decision-making. In other words, the benefits of their services are not or only partially captured in conventional market economics. So seagrass has the potential to capture and store carbon up to 35 times more efficiently than rainforests. Yeah? Much extraction from carbon dioxide in the air to carbon compounds into the seagrass, developing and growing into meadows and providing more room for biodiversity, nursery, and carbon uptake. In referring to seagrass as the lungs of the sea, the language here, the net primary production, is just so important, and these are the buzzwords, as I'm sure you all know. Net primary production, what does it mean? It means how fast plants can turn CO2 into carbon compounds in their tissue. So it gives us an index of biomass and plant matter produced over time. It calculates how much carbon is gained by photosynthesis and made into plant matter versus that lost to respiration. So seagrass beds have an average rates of between 300 and 1,500 grams of carbon per metre squared per year. I said to someone that I'd tell them about the maths. So I'm going to ask you about that later. So yes, it's really important, and it compares so well with seaweed. Of course, we know that seaweed, for example, comes in at 375, and terrestrial forests at 400 grams of carbon per metre squared per year on average. So it's often quoted that every second breath we breathe in comes from the ocean, from phytoplankton, from seaweed and seagrass. And this rather beautiful picture here, which I think you'll all love and appreciate, okay, is you can see oxygen bubbling up from the seagrass if you swim over it. Indeed, this picture was taken by a chap called Shane Gross, who photographed this picture and publicised it on UNESCO's World Heritage Centre's website. Just fabulous. And then here, the right lung here, again, spells it out even more clearly, that 1 square metre of seagrass, okay, generates 10 litres of oxygen a day, obviously depending on light levels and temperature. So to give you an idea, I guess, in terms of what does that mean? Well, one person consumes 550 litres of oxygen per day on average. So it begins to become rather important. So blue carbon is the collective term. What do we mean by blue carbon? Okay, it's the collective term for all carbon captured and stored by the ocean. Okay, the ocean is the largest long-term carbon sink on Earth. The ocean drives the carbon cycle on which all life depends. 93% of Earth's carbon dioxide is stored and cycled through the ocean. Okay? Carbon is stored within soft tissues, hard corals, skeletons, shells of marine plants, and in animals. And of course, this organic matter falls to the seabed and forms layers on the seafloor where it becomes buried. And it can be there for thousands to millions of years. And there's twice as much carbon locked in marine sediments as in terrestrial. So the ocean blue carbon habitats are hugely important to deal with our man-made CO2 emissions and the impact to our climate. However, only a tiny fraction of these deep ocean carbon sinks are in protected areas, less than 2%. And this is really important. So that means 98% are in unprotected areas. And given the increasing disturbances on industrial level in terms of mining and exploration and more mining, it's really important to recognise and lobby for. And that, in fact, that is a terrifying figure, really. So blue carbon, why? Because it can be labile, it can change, and it can release through decomposition or become recalcitrant, which means it can't be released by decomposing, but it can be freed by disturbance. A physical disturbance. So that is the challenge that we have. So, seagrass doesn't only affect climate change affects seagrass too. And we know climate change is happening. Raised ocean temperatures that we're seeing could impact conditions in shallow estuaries, bays, lagoons where seagrass lives. Some studies predict it will compound conditions that have driven 70% of UK's seagrass loss over the past decades. And as such, it will be very difficult for seagrass to withstand an increase in evaporation rates and salt content, especially in the shallow seas, nutrient enrichment leading to more microbial activity, algal blooms, cloudy water, release of toxic chemicals, reduced, decreased, dissolved oxygen, impacting all life in the meadows. And it's complex to predict because, of course, there's other factors at work, including acidification of the water, which, of course, could destroy the grazers of the sea. Increased temperature, though, elevates the respiration rates and the consumption of oxygen by grazers of the sea and other creatures, which, of course, then can lead to water deoxygenation. And increased evaporation and salt lowers the capacity of the water to hold oxygen. okay? So increased evaporation and salt lowers the capacity of water to hold oxygen. And you have something called stratification which occurs, which causes a lack of mixing. And if you have the lack of mixing, then that physically prevents reoxygenation from the atmosphere through to the water. And the lack of oxygen eventually leads to seagrass and animal and marine life mortality. This only adds to the release of nutrients and enrichment, which results in phytoplankton blooms that crowd out the light, and then secondary seagrass mortality. So such microbe activity increases in warm water, causing disease, causing changes in biodegradation that leads to build-up of sulfides, gases that are toxic to seagrass, and other organisms. Higher CO2 has also been shown to potentially raise photosynthesis, which is a good thing because it could allow seagrass to store more carbohydrate and grow and raise their thermal tolerance, but only if light is not limiting. So it's possible that some seagrass species will benefit in some situations from climate change. So sea level rise. Sea level rise, along with storms and flooding, of course, are likely to lead to increased coastal erosion and light extinction in the current seagrass beds. Waves and turbulence increase as shallow areas deepen, causing the destruction of seagrass, which, if it goes far enough, can stop root regeneration. And of course, that's really important. It's predicted at the moment that 20% of the seagrass beds and meadows are going to be lost in the Great Barrier Reef with a 1 metre sea level rise. And the majority of seagrass beds globally are unlikely to overcome all of these predicted impacts if they act together. So we still need, it's early days, we still need models, but the great thing about the ReMEDIES project that Kate's going to tell you about is it's using quite a lot of the data to create models that are relevant to our patch, if you like, the North Atlantic seas. A lot of the data at the moment we've been drawing on comes from other areas because that's where they've been doing the research. So let's talk time for policy change. Yeah? So rather brilliantly, in 2020, a fantastic report came out by the United Nations Environment Programme and their partners, and it's called The Value of Seagrasses to the Environment and to People, out of the blue. So covering only 0.1% of the ocean floor, 0.1%, I say this again, 0.1%, okay, undisturbed seagrass meadows can store 18% of the world's oceanic carbon if undisturbed, all right? So highly efficient blue carbon sinks. And seagrasses are also amongst the least protected coastal habitats. About 1 in 4 recorded seagrass meadows falls within protected areas. So 75% are available, so are vulnerable to disturbance, which can release CO2. So it's a tricky one, but there's lots of things that still can be done. For example, at this moment, I will tell you about a boat mooring, okay, and I'm going to cover this in a bit. But a boat mooring, if you change a boat mooring, okay, to something that actually cannot damage the seabed, okay, just by doing that very thing, replacing one boat mooring, okay, can help the seabed's capacity hold 6 tons of carbon, just in one boat mooring. So there's a lot that can be done, and I will come back to that in a moment. So our next slide is on another policy change, fantastic report. In May 2021, the Marine Conservation Society and Rewilding Britain released a report that looked at ocean-based solutions to fight climate crisis and restore seagrass. That's ocean-based solutions to fight climate crisis. Other natural solutions, of course, are beginning to be recognised as important tools in protecting us all from the effects of climate change. But this particular report outlines the importance of the ocean and of restoring the habitats in it, and helping the UK to reach net zero by 2050. And this report is well worth checking out, actually, on the Marine Conservation Society website. Okay, so to reach net zero, what does that mean? Well, it means the amount of greenhouse gases we produce and the amount taken away or absorbed must come to zero. So while we all might like to fly less or use our bikes or take individual actions and walk and reduce our carbon footprint, we also need to push for more solutions to removing greenhouse gases. Yeah? So by protecting and rewilding our habitats in our ocean, blue carbon stores will have increased capacity to store carbon. Seagrass beds are a hugely important blue carbon resource for the UK too. And a lovely study was done where they actually took 13 meadows in the southwest of England, did the maths, found that the carbon locked up in the top metre of these 13 meadows in southwest England actually equaled the CO2 emissions from over 10,500 individual people a year. That's just 13 meadows. So it's good that they're beginning to do the maths and work this out. So what can be done? Well, there's lots of fantastic things that can be done. If I show you that slide, there we are. Man-made threats to seagrass. So of course there's these big things like climate change. Of course there's all sorts of issues with seagrass. But there's a lot of things that we can do. And of course, one of the real challenges with seagrass, of course, it's in the first 10 meters. So it's impacted very, very vulnerable to habitat disturbance, such as trampling, launching craft, bait digging, moving vehicles intertidally, ship and boat anchors, propellers, all damaging the seagrass and the seabed. And of course, shipping naturally pollutes it as well. So wasting disease, actually, that was caused by parasites and caused huge dieback of seagrass in the 1930s. A fungus and the slime mold, unfortunately, pathogens that sort of impacted this, the seagrasses in the 1930s, is actually still present in the Isles of Scilly and in the Solent as well. So they're still quite vulnerable, you know. But also herbicides, fertilizers, pollutants, nutrient enrichment in the runoff from land-based agriculture and industry all increase the seagrass's vulnerability to pathogens. And invasive and introduced species like the English cordgrass, like the wireweed seaweed, can invade meadows and outcompete native seagrass. Coastal and marine development, particularly dredging, mining, and energy installations, can have direct and indirect impacts, and destroying meadows or cutting out light. So fishing and aquaculture could cause damage, of course, through gear in non-protected areas, and of course nutrient loads, of course, from aquaculture, from feeding the farmed fish. But the main issue, and the reason why you guys are all here, is the lack of awareness. That most people don't, even if they're fantastic marine enthusiasts and they use the marine environment regularly, most people don't really understand the importance of seagrass. So seagrass has a really hard time of it. So going back to the man-mades, here you have some photographs of anchor drag and chain abrasion. No seagrass is present, of course, in the areas that's been abraded. In both the photographs, you can see the scar on the seabed. Okay, it's very straightforward, where there's bare substrate and no seagrass. And around the scar, seagrass can be seen to be growing, okay, but as it hasn't been disturbed, if it hasn't been disturbed. So I'm just going to show you one other image. Okay, so here we have a lovely video which has been done by Marine Conservation Society volunteer Chris Cooling, and he's using a remotely operated underwater vehicle on the seabed to assess the damage impacts and the potential recovery of seagrass bed. This shows a concrete mooring. You can see it, huge concrete mooring block with a heavy chain attached. And this is a really traditional type of swing mooring, widely used in the UK. And you'll see the condition of the seabed around the chain and the block. And then you see the lovely seagrass. Okay. So the wonderful thing about life, isn't it, that sometimes there really are easy solutions. So look at this anchoring system. Okay, they've pulled it up rather than having it dredging along. This is an advanced mooring system, and it elevates the chain using a series of buoys that just lift it up. Doesn't cost a lot of money, okay? And the block can be replaced by a helical anchor screwed into the sediment, and that in fact impacts the seabed a lot as well, but it can still withstand the forces pulling on the anchor whilst allowing the chain to move freely about. This is called a Sterling mooring. Okay, they were called eco moorings, but now we have advanced mooring systems, or AMSs, and we are installing and monitoring them at a lot of sites. But anchors can also drag the seagrass roots and rhizomes connecting them out of the sediment, which causes them to die. So any flowering seagrasses or seeds will be removed, and the recolonization of that area may become impossible. So the impact, we know the impact of anchoring varies with the skill of the crew. Yeah, and using the right equipment in the right way. But again, good news. The Royal Yachting Association has making lots of guides available on anchoring, and they're offering training on this and so on. So they're really pushing it, and they're working very closely with the Marine Conservation Society in making things better. So you've had a fantastic overview of seagrass, and you're now I'm going to pass over to Kate, who will tell you a little bit about the ReMEDIES project. Okay? Oh, yep, I've got one more left. I have got one left. No, that's right. This is even better, actually, because this is what happens in America, of course, so it's going to be better. But so they have fantastic, it's like an elasticated tether. Okay, rather than a chain. And they're really quite common in the States. And depending on the size and the load of the boat, okay, and there's like a number of tethers. You may use a few, but they actually may tailor one specifically for a boat. And these tethers are used to hold pontoons in place and are very adaptable. And as we said, replacing one boat mooring could help save and restore the seagrass bed's capacity, and that would hold 6 tons of carbon. So I was doing the maths on this myself. And I was thinking, well, hang on a second, what about one of our rivers that we'd go to recently? And I was doing some seagrass work at the Bewley River recently. And there were 300 moorings on that particular spot. And so I did the numbers on that. And I thought, well, if those 300 moorings, okay, were AMS moorings, okay, that would save 1,800 tons of carbon. So again, it's just one simple thing, and there needs to just be a push for improved mooring options. So now you've got an idea of the importance of seagrass and the challenges that it faces, and we've all got to get to work. So let's have a look and see what work dear Kate's going to tell us about the ReMEDIES project.
Thank you, lovely. Right, I'm not as technically advanced as Sarah, so I've got notes. So I'm going to put these on here. Lovely. Fantastic. Hopefully we've not bombarded everybody too much with all the information. Let me just get back on. Oh, no, I'm going the wrong way. That was helpful. There we go. Fantastic. So, yes, I know there's a huge amount of information to take in there. And as I say, the ReMEDIES project, which is what I'm going to talk about now, so a lot of the work is actually based on previous projects, such as Project Seagrass that's actually happening in Wales. So there's been a huge amount of learning going on from those guys. So we have to credit them an awful lot. So as I say, we're kind of taking a lot of the best practice and using that in the ReMEDIES project as well. So So ReMEDIES, it's not got a hugely catchy title, unfortunately, so we've kind of shortened it to ReMEDIES, but basically it means reducing and mitigating erosion and disturbance impacts affecting the seabed, so even I can't say it either. So it is really focusing on the disturbance side of things, hugely. It is a 4-year collaborative EU project, so we're getting EU funding for this. Because of COVID, we hope that we might actually extend the project even further, so it might actually go on until 2024. That's what we're hoping, to get even more work done. So there are 7 partners, and again, I think Sarah's mentioned a few. So there's obviously Marine Conservation Society. We've also got Natural England. They're heading up the partnership, so they're doing a huge amount of the work. We've got the Royal Yachting Association. They're doing a huge amount with boaters, with the boating community, and they're part of the Green Blue as well. And then we've got Ocean Conservation Trust. They're actually doing a huge amount of the restoration work. So they're on the ground, or should I say in the water, doing a lot of the diving and getting a lot of the installations happening, along with the reseeding as well of the seagrass. And then we've also got Plymouth City Council and the Tamar Estuaries Consultative Forum as well. So it's a lot of people bringing their expertise together, which is fantastic. So the aims of the ReMEDIES project are many and varied. I've tried to kind of distill them down a little bit, but essentially it boils down to these ones that we've listed here. So we're trying to improve the condition of 5 SACs, so that's basically special areas of conservation interest. We're trying to install seagrass-friendly boat moorings as well. And essentially for that, we're going to need a huge amount of expertise, which we have got on board as well. We're involving loads of local communities, but particularly boaters and yachters as well, because again, you know, these are the people that are going to be using the seagrass-friendly boat moorings as well. We're trialling voluntary no anchor zones, so what we call VNAS. And again, I'm going to show you a little picture later of a VNAS buoy. Again, as I say, talking to communities and the public, and of course, we're restoring the seagrass beds as well through various methods, which again, I will go into as well. So where are the sites, basically? So these are the 5 sites that we have, that you can see on these photos here. So I cover the south and the southeast patch. So within MCS, I sort of look at the Essex estuaries and the Solent maritime areas. And then my colleague Jules covers the southeast. So she's kind of responsible for volunteering activities down in the Plymouth Sound and estuaries, in the Fal and Halford, and also the Isles of Scilly complex as well. So we kind of share the workload a little bit. These areas were specifically chosen because they're in what we call unfavourable status. So they really aren't doing very well. They have existing seagrass meadows that really do need that massive sort of restoration work. And there are significant declines within the habitat as well. So we're not actually just looking at seagrass. We're also looking at something called merle as well, which I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that. But essentially it's a calcified seaweed, really only found in the Fal and Halford, but it's incredibly slow growing. You find quite a lot of it up in Scotland. But again, we're very, very lucky to have it down this neck of the woods because it doesn't really like warm water that much. So that's why you find it up in Scotland. So again, that's a really sort of rare kind of specialist habitat as well. And we're also looking at muddy bottoms as well. So there's a lot of, as I say, a lot of sort of habitat that we're looking at, and how can we actually improve it. As I say, we have to credit Project Seagrass with a lot of work as well, because they've done a huge amount of learning that we've taken, and they actually found out initially that a lot of the sort of seagrass areas were being disturbed through the mooring and through the anchoring side of things as well. So that's why particularly we've kind of focused on that as a project. So we need to know where these places are, don't we? So we're looking at these particular areas, these 5 SACs, but obviously within the SAC areas, we need to know where the seagrass actually is. So there are a huge number of historical records. As I say, back in the 1930s, seagrass covered a massive, massive area. So around the UK, we have around about 11,000 miles of coastline. And again, seagrass loves to be in those shallow, sheltered areas, up to roughly about 10 metres depth as well. So we love those areas as well. We love those areas for recreation. So that's why a lot of the seagrass has disappeared as well. But essentially what we're doing is we're putting together some habitat maps. This has been done, as I say, with some cutting edge technology. This has mostly been done by Natural England. And these habitat maps are literally, as we speak, hot off the press. They are going to be going onto our website very, very soon. So they are literally just getting finalised at the moment. So by June, we should have them on the website. I've mentioned about voluntary no anchor zones as well. So we're talking about marker buoys. This is what they look like. This is what we call a VNAS, and we're putting those in and hopefully asking people not to moor or not to anchor within those particular areas. So again, please stay away from the seagrass, let it recover. We've got nautical charts as well. This is where the Royal Yachting Association come in. They're able to add some seagrass layers from the data that Natural England's collected as well. And they're adding these to these particular charts here, IMRE charts. Who's a boater here by any chance? Just question. No one, don't worry. Not a problem at all. As I say, this is still all useful information in case you know somebody who's a boater. So yes, as I say, if you're a boater, you'd probably be quite familiar with these charts here. And we're also putting in signage, particularly around the shoreline. So you might come across these in the particular SAC areas as well. And again, as you might have already seen, we've got lots of posters and leaflets that we're sort of using to try and talk to people about what's happening. So lots going on. Just a few maps for you, as I say, to show you where these seagrass beds are. Unfortunately, in and around Lewis, we have no seagrass, I'm afraid. Historically, we probably have had seagrass, but we have a database, or basically anybody can access a database called the National Biodiversity Network, the NBN Gateway. And that's got a huge number of historical public records on as well. So you can see whether seagrass was around in this particular area. But we also want people to keep an eye out and upload records if they can as well. So the nearest seagrass beds are probably, as I say, Chichester way. So you're kind of stuck in the middle almost. There's a couple of historical records over at Folkestone Way. But here, as I say, in the SAC that we're looking at, which is a Solent, this is where some of the seagrass beds are. So we can see around Leap on the mainland. We've got Stanswood, we've got Hillhead. There's a huge number of seagrass beds around the Isle of Wight. Again, back on the mainland, we can see around Portsmouth area and again Chichester, but all around Cowes, East Cowes, Ryde as well. All these red patches, these are all seagrass areas. So again, this is another reason why we really want to try and concentrate our efforts on restoring them, particularly in the Solent as well. So there we go. So targeting the Solent and the Isle of Wight for the seed bagging and the deployment. We have already done a huge amount of this. Again, we've managed to get a huge number of volunteers together. I think the target this year was about 18,000 bags, seed bags, so they all have to be done by hand. These are the seed bags here, and essentially you take some germinating seeds, you pop them in a bag with a load of sand, a little bit of nutrient just to kind of set them off as well. You tie them up, and then you have to thoroughly douse them and wet them so that they can then be deployed on the seabed. So this again all has to be done by hand. We did 4,000 bags at the National Oceanographic Institute down in Southampton. Sarah's a part of that, which was amazing. And again, we've had a lot of bags being put in Plymouth as well. So this restoration work is happening and you can get involved. That's one of the ways you can actually get involved to help. The different SAC areas, the different special areas of conservation interest, they're all at different stages. So the project started off in Plymouth and the Fal and Halford, so they're much further along than we are in the Solent. So it's been staged, basically. It's been done in stages. Essex is not quite as far along as Plymouth or as the Solent, unfortunately. But again, there's a huge amount of work being done in Essex due to water quality as well. So we don't want to deploy lots of seagrass and lots of seagrass bags in Essex if the water quality is not good enough. So there's a huge amount of research being done into that. But again, you can see these areas that we're concentrating on. And again, it sounds very, very technical deploying these things on the seabed. But essentially, you go out on a boat, you've got a big boat, you've got very, very sort of large crates, and you literally take these bags and you put them down a chute and they end up on the seabed. And then the seagrass then roots through those bags and actually roots into the substrate. So here we are, Essex again, so you can see the red circles are where seagrass actually is. There's been a huge amount of mapping being done through drones as well, so again that's a really good way of getting information. Unfortunately, a couple of the drawbacks in Essex have been, as I've just mentioned, about water quality, but also because there's a huge amount of no-fly zones as well, so around Essex, so you can't actually get out, and there's a huge amount of Ministry of Defence areas as well, so that kind of really sort of it doesn't help very much, unfortunately, to try and sort of get out there and have a look. But Essex has got quite a lot of seagrass actually, and thankfully a lot of it hasn't been degraded through boats being pulled across it, because it's so flat that when the tide comes in, it literally just lifts the boats up off the actual seagrass meadows, which is fantastic. So rather than it coming in gradually, it comes in quite quickly and it lifts the boats up, which is really good. So again, there's been lots of different things happening in these different areas. Again, it's not one size fits all, basically. So again, I know this is not quite close, but again, just in case any of you know anybody who lives down this neck of the woods in Plymouth, just wanted to show you where the seagrass beds were or are. So again, you can see where they, as I say, see where they are in terms of the red areas there. So I'll add another map there. And again, a huge amount of work has actually been done on Jennycliff Bay. Anybody been there? It's a lovely spot, very, very nice. So voluntary no anchor zones have been installed there as well. Jennycliff Bay, lovely, lovely place. And I think they're up to about 4 hectares of restored seagrass area. So they've been deploying these bags onto the seabed. They've also, and this is the Ocean Conservation Trust, they've also been deploying what they call pillows as well. So as well as putting bags of seed onto the seabed, they've been putting these big Hessian mats down as well, so trialling to see if that actually makes a difference in terms of seagrass growing back or regrowing faster than the actual, when using the actual bags. And it seems to be working very well. So they grow these mats in the lab, in the Plymouth Aquarium lab, and then they deploy those back onto the seabed, and that seems to be working incredibly well. Plymouth Sound is very, very sheltered, which is fantastic. So the seagrass is coming back, and before I came here tonight, I was desperate to try and get some of these pictures for you to show you the seagrass seedlings coming through, all this Hessian. Unfortunately, Ocean Conservation Trust, bless them, they're out all the time, so they haven't got back to me, but I will be able to share those with you at some point. The solent is a bit of a different matter, so there's a lot more current in the solent, so we are finding in certain areas that the current's actually taking some of the bags away. Again, not entirely unexpected, but it's something obviously that we have to work on in the future to then redeploy in areas where it's a little bit, as I say, the current's not quite as strong. So more stuff going on. So I have actually talked quite a bit about this already. As I say, we've put quite a lot of seedlings in. This has been done by a huge number of volunteers, as well as staff from the Ocean Conservation Trust as well. We've been talking a huge amount to harbour masters and local mariners as well, to try and get them on board, and obviously tell sort of local, as I say, local boaters and local yachters, etc., where these things are actually being placed, where the markers are being placed, and where the sort of no anchor zones are, and also where the new advanced mooring systems are as well. So lots going on there. We're upgrading a few of the existing moorings as well. So again, the project's been funded to upgrade the old sort of traditional mooring blocks, which are big concrete bases with huge chains, into these, what we call these helical anchors. And again, essentially, it is literally a pole that gets screwed into the seabed. Depending on the substrate, you can screw more than one pole in. And then what you do is you attach a shackle to the top of that pole, which then spins round. And again, you've literally got hardly any disturbance to the seabed once that happens. Again, these advanced mooring systems, they're used an awful lot in different countries. It's just that we're not used to them here. That is the thing. They are tried and tested, but not necessarily, as I say, people used to using them in the UK. So we're trying to put more in. We're trying to get more people to use these as well. So again, if you know of anybody who has got a boat who would like to trial it, then obviously please let us know, because that's really useful. So we come to what else can you do? So obviously volunteering, even a small thing makes a massive difference as well. So you've seen what Sarah's done this evening. I have to say a massive hats off to you, Sarah, because you've put so much work into this. And we would love it if people went out and talked to more sort of, local communities. And we will provide things like this as well. So we'll provide the actual presentation that you can go out and talk to people about what's going on within the ReMEDIES project. You can be a Seagrass ambassador or a Seagrass Talks co-presenter. That's absolutely wonderful. If you don't want to do something as in-depth as that, you could potentially go out and have a look for seagrass yourself in the areas that I've just mentioned, or again, any records are very, very useful because some of the historical records are incredibly old now. And again, a lot has changed since even 10 years ago. You can do the seagrass seed bagging. There's recreational boat surveys where we're actually asking people to go out and log when they see boats and where they see boats and how long the boats are spending in a particular area. That's really useful. The Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust are massively on board with that, so you can actually do it through them if you want to, as opposed to the ReMEDIES project. Obviously use advanced mooring systems if you possibly can, that's absolutely brilliant, and obviously raise awareness in any way. You guys might have a huge number of ideas, so please do come to us at the end, or even write your thoughts down and let us know, what you could potentially do to sort of get involved. Anybody a diver here? Fantastic. So heard of Sea Search at all? Brilliant stuff. So Sea Search it was founded by Marine Conservation Society. It is still part of Marine Conservation Society, but because they're so big now and they work with a lot of other organisations, they are almost sort of standalone as well. So they stand alone and do their own thing, but with support from the Marine Conservation Society. And a lot of people who get involved with Sea Search are also partnered up with the wildlife trusts as well, which is brilliant. There's a huge number of people that contribute a lot of data as well. So this is where I have to go into my notes section now to have a look, because it's quite incredible what Sea Search actually does. So they complete over 1,000 hours of underwater surveys, and that's every single year. Sea Search covers the whole of Britain and Ireland as well. So again, it's very, very well resourced and sort of widely spread as well. There's about 300 new volunteers that get trained every year, which is absolutely brilliant. So their motto is any dive can be a Sea Search dive, which is fantastic. And their team includes over 900 qualified observers and over 150 qualified surveyors as well. So it's a big deal, is Sea Search. It's brilliant. You can download the data as well. So it is open source. You can go on and you can download data for, as I say, just put in the filters and find out what is of interest to yourselves. But yes, it's all freely available on the website. You can download lots of reports. Again, just as a final fact and figure, which I didn't know, was that the volunteers from Sea Search have added over 800,000 records to the National Biodiversity Network Atlas as well, which is absolutely amazing. So with that, and they do it all, as I say, all voluntarily. So yeah, big hats off to those guys as well. So again, what else can we do? Again, even if you're just sort of out on a walk and you speak to a local harbour master, a boater, a yachter, that all helps. It really does, raising that awareness, because so many people do not know about seagrass. The awareness is increasing, which is amazing, but there's a lot of people out there who still don't know. Obviously look out for seagrass. You can upload, as I say, information and data to the National Biodiversity Network. Avoid disturbance, obviously, if you possibly can. And again, we're just mentioning about the leaflets and stuff. There's a huge amount of stuff available online on the Save Our Seabed website, which is a dedicated website for the project. So that's where the maps will go. That's where any information will go as well. And again, I'm not going to labour a point here and teach grandma to suck eggs, but there's obviously lots of other ways we can help seagrass, particularly in relation to climate change as well. So again, it's some of this stuff sounds really simple, and it is, but it really does help as well. So, seagrass has got the potential to impact climate change, but obviously the way climate change is going, it will impact seagrass. So if we can help it a little bit more, if we can help seagrass a little bit in terms of climate change, then obviously we're doing a good thing. You can follow our social media. I have to say I'm not the most tech-savvy person, unfortunately, but there's a huge amount of information that goes on, particularly on the Ocean Conservation Trust social media sites, Twitter, for example. So you will find out an awful lot if you just follow some of these social media feeds. Ocean Conservation Trust have put some great summaries of the project to date. They've put up a huge amount of information on the deployment and the seagrass bagging. Yeah, you can find out a huge amount of stuff on there as well. And again, the Save Our Seabed website is the partner website. It's the kind of the go-to website to find out what's actually going on as well. So again, if you can promote or follow or even retweet, repost any of the information on there, that helps a huge amount. Marine Conservation Society, we have what we call an Ocean Superhero session, so we're going into schools as well by literally just through any channels possible. So we're promoting it out massively through MCS, but obviously we have great sea champions who are actually education trained. In fact, I'm going to put somebody on the spot here now and say hello to Rachel over there, who's an education trained sea champion as well. So this is something that we're delivering, so we really want to get kids involved as well. So this is talking to we are tasked with talking to nearly 750,000 people over the life of the project. So we need a little bit of help in that because I'm not going to manage all that myself, and our lovely volunteers are not going to manage it all on their own either. So yes, we really, as I say, want to get this message across to kids as well. So if you're able to promote the Ocean Superhero session, absolutely wonderful. If you want to become an education trained sea champion, absolutely wonderful as well. So just a few more tools and ideas. There's a volunteer resource document that I've put together along with my colleague Jules. That's available at the front there. That just gives you a little idea about some of the literature that's available and where you can find it. So again, there's a little document on the front here if you want to take that away. I really have to plug this because, again, it's just getting amazing people involved in the work of the project. So there are 3 videos that have been put together by sea champions talking about seagrass, why it's amazing, why should people care, what's incredible about it. I have got one that I can show you just after this. It's a tool to use. So if you would like to share this, you like to get it into schools, like to promote it out to, any of your sort of, friends, family, that kind of thing, that would be wonderful because these videos aren't really getting used at the moment. And as I say, they are a really great tool to kind of get that message out there. And of course we have newsletters as well. Save Our Seabed, at the risk of sounding like a stuck record. That's, as I say, you can sign up to our Save Our Seabed newsletter, which will give you loads of information on the ReMEDIES project. And of course we've got the Marine Conservation Society newsletter as well. That's talking about seagrass and blue carbon. Ocean Conservation Trust, very, very similar as well. They'll be talking about the practical side of things.
What's so amazing?
This is the video.
Seagrass increases biodiversity and is home to many marine organisms, such as seahorses, stalked jellyfish, bobtail squid, sea hares, cuttlefish eggs, hermit crabs, sea slugs, zooplankton, and juvenile fish. Seagrass helps to combat climate change. It does this by absorbing up to 35 times more carbon than the Amazon rainforest. Carbon is stored within the seagrass and also in seabed sediments. Each metre squared produces 10 litres of oxygen per day. Because of this, seagrass is known as the lungs of the ocean. Seagrass absorbs wave action and reduces coastal erosion. Seagrass meadows remove nutrients from runoff and pollutants from water by locking them away.
Lovely stuff. I always get a real sort of happy feeling when I see these seagrass videos because, as I say, our sea champions have put so much effort into them. They're all different. As I say, one's an animation, really great to use in schools. We've got this one here as well, and then we have another one that's sort of slightly similar to this one, but it's a little bit more hard hitting, but without scaring the pants off everybody. So yeah, they're really good. And again, they're available to use. So again, we're just sort of coming to the end of the presentation now. Just a few thanks and acknowledgements. Huge number of people put lots of effort into all this information here. So just want to thank them for putting that together for us, because again, this isn't all my work at all. And then again, just a huge thank you for listening. So we have got a little bit of time now for questions. Sarah and I are more than happy to answer those. You're more than welcome to come and pick up any information that you want as well. But again, I just want to really say thank you so much to Sarah for getting everybody here and for you guys for coming as well, because she's done such an amazing job, put so much hard work into it. So please, can you just give Sarah a round of applause?